So, curiously enough, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. And when it comes to, I'm sort of like just leaping straight into this a bit. Chris and nostalgia. Now, nostalgia is, as you might actually, to be honest, it's a little bit of a part of Chris's persona in many ways because his rhetoric, his bullshit, and his propaganda are sort of things you would almost see akin to pre 1950s America. And yet, for some strange reason, Chris seems to think carrying a lot of these rhetorics, and whether it's mostly influenced by his parents or how he thinks that, people. But then again, that doesn't really play into probably today's article because one thing that sort of links these two a little bit is that when Chris was growing up in the 1980s, it probably was a very different world, a very exciting and nuanced age, and goodness knows what he must have thought of the future, or specifically his future, but we'll get into that. And so, that is where our story begins. Incomplete due to stress, even though some might say the majority of the work has been done with what Chris has told us about his past. I really miss the good old days. Chris reminiscing on his high school days, back when Chris might have possibly still had a brighter future ahead of him. We know that's not the case. Maybe it never was the case, but hell, this young man probably had a dream of some description. Nostalgia is a sentimental longing or wishful affection for the past, typically for periods and or places with happy personal associations. It is associated with a yearning for the past, its personalities and events, particularly for the good old days or childhood events. The foundation of much of what Chris's adult life has been his fixation on is the past, especially for things that have had deep significance to his life, in order to escape from the present, whether it be through cartoons, interacting with past gal pals and sweethearts, or reminiscing past experiences with trolls. Probably nowhere near the latter because, well, for reasons that, once again, I'm never particularly certain of why. Chris seems more fixated on the fact that they were there to coddle him, as well as the fact that they kind of caused a lot of Chris's suffering in many ways, but, you be the judge on that. Nostalgia in Chris's life. Although viewed as a mental disease when it was first discovered, I didn't know that. Nostalgia in the modern age is seen as a natural, common, positive emotion for escaping the confines of reality. Seeing how difficult it is for Chris to grasp reality as it is in its present state, the way he grasps the past is unimaginably worse. Chris's nostalgia comes from a wide variety of sources. It can be speculated that the main source of Chris's nostalgia in unhealthy amounts is in his stress. At a psychological level, nostalgia is the result of negative feelings and results in the increase of one's positive emotions. It can also be used as a coping mechanism for dealing with whatever stressful situation one may be in. Given how Chris currently lives his life, constantly dealing with weans and being denied China for every girl he meets, Chris will sometimes use his past experiences in a strange way to relieve his stress. For example, at the end of the Jessica saga, Chris, feeling awfully depressed from losing his girlfriend for the umpteenth time, decided to contact Megan on her Facebook and hook up with her again, even though after being accusing her of being behind his current situation for the past 4 years. Other times, Chris will hold on to past experiences that gave him grief. For example, before attempting to contact Megan ever again, Chris always held on to how Megan was somehow responsible for his problems in his life for supposedly linking information of him on Encyclopedia Dramatica with Mims and Lucas. We of course know that Megan was not behind this and it was all down to Mims and Lucas. This attachment to such events can become so strong that eventually Chris will snap from all of the added stress. For example, in several 2013 September Facebook posts, Chris continuously curses Megan along with other fruits of his bad memories. Anomnia. Nostalgia for a time before Chris was born. As with many people, Chris also experiences nostalgia for media released before he was born. Much like a modern kid who loves 80s music will tell you about how Queen is the best band on the planet, they mostly for the time were, Chris has a liking for I Love Lucy, Gilligan's Island, and other media released during Bob and Bob's time. This is common for people who spend more time around their parents than they do their own peers. Make of that what you will. There is some TV that is absolutely great in the past that they're simply not around anymore anyway. But I don't know. Maybe I'm not necessarily the most. I don't watch a whole lot of TV anyway, so I haven't really watched telly that much for the last 10 years. But again, you be the judge on that. Chris and his childhood. When it comes to nostalgia, people tend to cherish it in order to relive a far simpler time. While this is perfectly normal in most people, Chris's obsession with his past takes this normal aspect of the human psyche and twists it to pathological degrees. Chris reveals in his childhood memories and pursuing childlike fantasies to fill up the stressful parts of his life, purely to ignore them. After getting a bear hug at the 2018 MagFest from a fan who lifted his 212-pound plus body off the ground, Chris commented on the nostalgia he felt, saying, "How did anyone get video or photo of a spinal palm hugging me and lifting me up high after the panel? I would love to have that video to watch over and over." That's creepy enough. I never thought I could ever be lifted up high by anyone since I got too heavy for my parents. I know, he was only 17. Manchester High. Of all the memories Chris holds dear, he seems to be most attached to his years in Manchester High School. It isn't too hard to see why. His years there were among the last where he frequently got out of his house and interacted in a social environment. This is best shown with the Green County conspiracy video, the Lego replica, and him wearing the jacket, as shown with the 26th of December 2014 incident. He also purchased a school desk, which he uses as a workstation, allowing him to further transition back to his happiest years. For many years, he fixated on the idea of a high school reunion, but his numerous attempts at trying to hold one failed, likely for the best, as his Manchester High School friends of real life can't possibly compare one with the one in his mind. Like many people who overindulge in nostalgia, Chris has a warped view of his time at Manchester High School in retrospect. He often looks back on it as a time when he was surrounded by friends and could have easily obtained the true love he seeks to this day. If only he had known how good he had it. In reality, his more down-to-earth recollections of high school paint a picture, I should say, of Chris being bullied, fairly isolated, and disengaged, with even his friends only really sticking around because the education setting required them to. Now, I know what you're probably thinking. That was a little bit sparse. I mean, it's like not much to go over here, but articles like these also help illustrate something almost incredibly tragic when it comes to Chris, and it's the fact that this is one of those rare instances where you can honestly say, because of who Chris is, he can't really hurt anybody for his actions that he's done today, but more rather, you could almost sort of wonder what exactly must he be thinking sometimes, that when the dust settles and when all the trolling just sort of eventually stops, what do you think Chris must think about in his mind about when you consider the fact that he sits at home, does nothing, doesn't go to work, and perhaps after all the trolling, maybe sometime in at least maybe late 2013, Chris would have had the only thing to do would be to sit at home all day and think about all that he had lost. His gal pals, his freedom, his online credibility, the game place, even his own father. Maybe it would be hard to say, perhaps, which one Chris sincerely misses the most. But still, that's also the problem, ladies and gentlemen, when you have feasibly screwed yourself over and it leaves you feeling as though you've got nothing better to look ahead to. So the only thing to do is to look to the past. Not as a source of inspiration, not as a source of understanding when you were in tough situations when you were younger and what you did to get rid of them or to get around them, but rather just to say, that was good. I like that. I liked it a lot better than I thought I would. That's probably one of the saddest parts about really all this, is that when you really think about it, and I'm not saying, of course, Chris is the most ideal of characters in the world, but at the end of the day, he is still technically a human being. And if he is worse than other people, it is the result and not the cause of his way of life. Maybe if there were some people who would have taken on Chris's nonsense at face value and liked them, Chris might have been in a very different position. But unfortunately, his positions and his stances were wrong, and unfortunately, that's what he had to live with. So goodness knows why he would want to look back on that, but again, that's entirely up to interpretation right there. So anyway, I hope all of you guys have enjoyed this rather shortish reading than average of Chris and Nostalgia, and I cannot wait to see all of you guys again in the next video. Take care, and bye-bye for now.